Mary and John had been together for 6 years. They lived in a small town where Mary worked in banking, and John worked remotely as a programmer for an international company. When Mary received an offer for a promotion and a position at the main branch in the capital, they decided to move. Since John's job wasn't tied to a specific location, and Mary was eager to embrace a new environment, the move seemed like the right decision. The transition to the capital, however, wasn't easy. The couple had to adapt to the city's fast-paced lifestyle and slightly different customs. Mary was particularly taken aback by how competitive the corporate environment was. Her colleagues were driven, eager to outperform one another and focus on earning bonuses. Among them was Kinsley, who saw Mary as a potential rival. Kinsley often intimidated her or provided misleading information. Despite these challenges, Mary stayed confident and professional in her work. One evening, Mary confided in John about the intense competition in her office. He listened patiently and reassured her, saying, "Give it some time. You will adjust to the new dynamics, and things will settle down." His words gave her some comfort, and she resolved to keep pushing forward. A few weeks later, the office was abuzz with excitement. News of the company's annual party spread quickly, and everyone eagerly discussed the upcoming event. The announcement brought a surprising twist. Kinsley, who had been cold toward Mary, approached her with unexpected warmth. She invited Mary to lunch and spoke enthusiastically about the fun activities planned for the party. Mary was taken aback by Kinsley's sudden friendliness. However, she chose not to dwell on it and decided to remain cautious. Over the following days, Kinsley made consistent efforts to win Mary's trust, her demeanor seemingly genuine. Though Mary was aware of Kinsley's past behavior, she didn't suspect anything malicious. Excited about the company party, Mary shared the news with John and invited him to join. Intrigued by the opportunity to meet her new colleagues, John happily accepted. From Mary's recent updates, it sounded like things were finally improving at her workplace, and he was curious to see it for himself. On the day of the event, Mary sat in front of the mirror, carefully getting ready for the evening. Meanwhile, John was at his desk, finishing up some work on his computer. Suddenly, he stopped typing and began reading something on his phone. His face tensed as he muttered, "Oh no," under his breath, clearly frustrated. Mary turned toward him. "What's wrong?" she asked with concern. John sighed. "I just got an urgent message. There's a critical issue with the application I'm working on, and I need to fix it right away." Mary frowned. "Does that mean you can't come to the party?" "I'm afraid so," John replied, regret in his voice. "I hate to miss it, but this can't wait." Disappointed but understanding, Mary nodded. "It's okay. I'll go alone and represent us both." She offered him a reassuring smile. Even though she wished he could join her, John looked at Mary apologetically. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know how much this evening means to you. But I realize your work is important, and there's nothing I can do about the situation right now." Mary managed a small smile and replied, "It's okay. I understand." She finished getting ready, packed her bag, and kissed John goodbye. "I'll see you later," she said before heading out to the restaurant. As soon as Mary entered the venue, Kinsley greeted her warmly and handed her a glass of champagne. "Let's drink to the celebration and to our new friendships," Kinsley said with an unusually cheerful smile. Mary hesitated. She hadn't eaten much and knew drinking on an empty stomach wasn't wise. However, the insistence of her colleagues and the celebratory atmosphere made it hard to refuse. Throughout the evening, Kinsley made a point of ensuring Mary's glass was always full. One drink turned into another, and before long, Mary felt relaxed and lightheaded from the alcohol. The lively music and the atmosphere encouraged her to dance, and she decided to let loose a little. As she swayed on the dance floor, she didn't notice Arthur, a colleague from her department, approaching. Arthur struck up a conversation, and to Mary's surprise, he was charming, funny, and engaging. Soon, the conversation turned personal. Arthur began showering her with compliments, his words tinged with flirtation. Mary couldn't help but feel a thrill at the attention, especially from Arthur, the most attractive man in the office and a figure of fascination among many women. She hadn't sought his interest, yet here he was drawn to her. Without warning, Kinsley disappeared from the scene, leaving Mary and Arthur alone. Arthur leaned in closer, his voice low as he whispered sweet nothings in her ear. He placed a hand gently on her arm, then suggested they find a quieter spot to talk. At first, Mary resisted. She knew it was wrong. She was married, and this wasn't the type of attention she should entertain. But the alcohol and Arthur's persistence wore down her resolve. Against her better judgment, she followed him down a deserted hallway. They slipped into a vacant office, and in a fleeting moment of weakness, the situation escalated. The passion was brief, and the reality of her actions crashed over Mary almost immediately. Arthur hastily adjusted his clothes, offering her a casual smile, but Mary stood frozen, the weight of guilt and shame bearing down on her. She felt sick with regret. Without another word, Mary bolted from the office. She hailed a cab, unable to look anyone in the eye as she left the restaurant. When she arrived home, the house was quiet. John was already asleep, blissfully unaware of what had happened. Mary breathed a sigh of relief. At least he won't see me like this, she thought. She quickly tossed her dress into the washing machine and stepped into the shower. Under the stream of water, she let her tears flow freely, the enormity of her actions crushing her spirit. Mary knew she had to tell John the truth, but the thought of doing so paralyzed her. The idea of breaking his heart was unbearable. Over the next week, she became a shadow of her former self, silent, withdrawn, and consumed by despair. John quickly noticed a change in her demeanor. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, he asked gently, "Mary, is everything all right? You've been so quiet lately. Is something wrong?" Mary kept telling John that everything was fine, but she was merely avoiding the inevitable. She knew the truth was bound to come out, yet she couldn't bring herself to confess. Unfortunately, someone else decided to take matters into their own hands. One evening, Mary returned home to find the apartment eerily quiet. She stepped into the living room and saw John sitting on the couch. His head was bowed, and his hands were clasped tightly in front of him. A tablet lay on the coffee table in front of him, its screen lit. The sight made Mary's heart clench with dread. Without looking up, John said, "Your friend Kinsley sent me this." He picked up the tablet and handed it to her. Mary's hands trembled as she took it. The tablet played a video captured by a surveillance camera in the office during the company party. It showed Mary and Arthur slipping into the hallway together, disappearing into the vacant office. Mary's breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her. This was why Kinsley had been so friendly, why she had worked so hard to gain her trust. It had all been a setup. "She's always been trying to sabotage me," Mary exclaimed, tears welling in her eyes. "I told you she was out to get me." John finally lifted his gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and disappointment. "So, there's no video?" he asked, his voice low and steady, though it quivered with emotion. Mary froze. The weight of his question pressed down on her. Her defenses crumbled as she whispered, "It's me." Tears streamed down her face, and she struggled to continue. "I had too much to drink, and I'm so sorry." John's expression darkened. He was stunned, the betrayal cutting deep. He stood up, pacing the room in silence. Finally, he turned to her and said, "I don't know if I can ever get over something like this. I need time to think." Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and left the apartment, leaving Mary alone with her guilt and despair. As he walked aimlessly through the streets, John was consumed by pain and regret. If only he had gone to the party with her, perhaps none of this would have happened. But then, he reminded himself that Mary could have made a different choice. The security footage made it clear that no one had forced her. The reality was that she had betrayed him of her own volition. John reflected on the happy moments they'd shared over the years. He wondered where it had all gone wrong, and whether their relationship could ever recover. The answer became painfully clear. He couldn't see her in the same light anymore. How much longer would she have kept this from him if Kinsley hadn't exposed it? The trust was broken, and John couldn't fool himself into thinking their marriage could survive. The next morning, John made the difficult decision to file for divorce. It was a choice he never imagined he'd have to make, but he couldn't stay in a marriage where trust no longer existed. He packed his belongings and moved out, leaving Mary in the rented apartment in the city. He relocated to a small town in the South, a place he'd always loved and hoped would bring him some peace. For Mary, life unraveled quickly. The scandal at work spread like wildfire. Arthur, unabashed, bragged to his colleagues about their brief affair, calling Mary his new girlfriend. Some even circulated a copy of the security footage that had been sold by a security guard. The humiliation was unbearable, and Mary found herself the target of office gossip and judgment. Unable to face her colleagues or continue working at the bank's main office, Mary quit her job and left the city. She retreated to her childhood town, hoping to rebuild her life, though the weight of her choices haunted her every day.